Wani was shocked to discover that Ryu knew that he was being bullied. He didn't want it to be obvious, because he knew his big bro was already having a hard time. Looking at Wani's reaction, Ryu felt sorry because honestly, he didn't know about it before. He first found out the truth a few hours after he returned from round 1 in his previous tries. That time, he decided to go to sleep while Wani went out to school. He was soon awakened from his slumber by the constant ringing of his phone. The moment he picks it up, a voice asks him if he was the guardian of Wani. The voice then tells him that needed to come to the hospital immediately. Ryu rushes out instantly after hearing the news. Wani had come back blind after being beaten up by Bang Tae-gyu. Ryu, who was a weak and pathetic older brother back then, couldn't even protect his younger brother. But this time was going to be different, as Ryu was determined to not let anyone bother him again. We now turn to an abandoned warehouse, where somebody is getting beaten up. A blonde man was shouting at some injured dudes, telling them to bring $200 each. But since they failed to reply back to him, he saw this as an insult. The big blonde man started to kick the shit out of them once again. As he continued to beat them, his group was watching him. They were happy to see how ruthless he was to the losers. But they were soon feeling afraid of Tae-gyu. After all, he did make the other school seniors grovel to him, so these guys knew that they shouldn't play around with him. He soon returns to them, cracking his neck. He was pissed off since he was planning to buy a motorcycle with today's money. So then, he asks his group if there was some other way to get money. His question made them think hard before one of them came up with an idea. He reminded Tae-gyu that he has his errand boy. Hearing that idea brought a smile to the blonde's douchebag's face. He remembered that he was going to call Wani today, since he wanted to beat him up for a bit for the new year. But then Tae-gyu tells them that Wani was a complete bum, because after being beaten by him before, he remembered that Wani didn't even bring a single penny, plus the place where he lives was pretty shitty. Bringing disappointment to the gang as they looked upset. But as Tae-gyu remembers that Wani had an older brother, light started to pour into the warehouse, making the others wonder what was wrong after seeing his reaction. Ryu had arrived along with Wani behind him. The gang were glad to see them as they were scared for no reason. Tae-gyu made his way past the gang to greet Wani, but instead he shouts at him, calling Wani a bastard. Wani apologizes to him straight away while trembling in fear, as he holds onto Ryu's jacket. Tae-gyu, however, was more concerned over who Wani brought as he finds the mysterious person's expression extremely annoying. So he shouts at Wani, telling him to explain who the person he brought along with. Wani started to stutter in his speech as he tried his best to explain to Tae-gyu. Ryu introduces himself as Wani's older brother to the gang of bullies. After knowing who he was, Tae-gyu was preparing to kill both of them today. He looks at one of his gang members who immediately understood what he wanted. So the minions made the first move, walking confidently towards Ryu and Wani in order to beat them up. The first dead man started to flex his height against Ryu, so our boy answered with a straight jab into his ugly face. As the first dead gang member fell, the other one was startled by what happened. He tries to land a blow onto Ryu but completely misses his attack. Who in return sends another jab, smashing the bully's face. This time, Ryu's attack was powerful enough to send the bully flying into the shelves. The remaining bullies couldn't just stand by and watch, so they went in for the kill against Ryu. But all they got in return were punches directly into their faces. The only one left standing in the bully gang was Tae-gyu, who stood behind while everything was happening. For some reason, he was laughing to himself, thinking that Ryu was just some nerd, who must have learned boxing somewhere. He finds it funny that Ryu would come to him with only that much skill. He confidently walks towards Ryu, thinking that he was acting out just because he learned boxing somewhere. As he towers over Ryu, he tells him that he doesn't understand the importance of weight class in boxing. Ryu was glad that Tae-gyu hasn't heard the news, which left him all annoyed and confused. So he decides to throw a punch at Ryu, who casually dodges it by moving to the side. Tae-gyu was relentless with his attacks as he constantly tried to land a hit onto Ryu, who was moving like a squirrel, pissing off Tae-gyu even more. After failing to land any hits, Tae-gyu's vision of Ryu started to blur, making him wonder what was going on. This time it was Ryu's turn as he walked towards Tae-gyu, with his fist covered in a blue aura. He tells him that if he watched the news, then he wouldn't come at a player like him. With that, Ryu ends the match with a single uppercut to his face. But it didn't end the match as the big bully was able to come back from Ryu's attack. But as Tae-gyu punches in front of himself, he realizes that Ryu has disappeared from his sights. But as he figured out where our boy was, it was too late. Ryu lands another massive punch to Tae-gyu's face at once. Feeling the pain behind that hit as he walked back, Taegyu warns Ryu that he could knock him out with a single punch. But the sight of his own teeth falling out and blood dripping from his mouth made him pause, before turning into full-on rage mode, as he swears to kill Ryu this time. But his punches can never land as Ryu easily sidesteps them, before grabbing onto his wrist and holding Taegyu in place, allowing Ryu to punch him multiple times on the other side of his face. The other bullies could only hide behind some boxes as they watched in fear and shock over what Ryu was doing to their leader. Feeling the pain behind the punches, Taegyu slowly realizes that Ryu was purposely aiming to hit him in the face. Looking at our boy smiling at him, the bully was determined to at least land one single punch. So he rushes towards Ryu, begging any gods for the chance to at least land a single punch on our man. His prayer was answered in the form of a leg attack this time. Ryu decided to kick, sending the bully flying far towards the wall this time. Kneeling on the ground, Taegyu was trying to catch his breath as Ryu called out to him. With cold dead eyes, Ryu stares at the bully who was in pain, asking him if what he feels hurts. Because after regressing 99 times, an image of his younger brother, bandages wrapped around his eyes that were bleeding and wounds all over his body, was a sight that, as the older brother, couldn't forget. Especially the emotions that he felt that day. As he walked over to the bully, who was feeling afraid of Ryu, who was determined to stop his younger brother from experiencing that horrendous hell again. Taegyu started to beg him not to come any closer, but as he begs Ryu to stop, it was useless, as our boy holds onto his hand, surprising the bully. With a cold smile on his face, Ryu tells the bully that he shouldn't have messed with his younger brother. Snap! Taegyu heard a loud snap sound as he looked at his own hand before screaming in pain as Ryu had broken his wrist in a single motion. But the punishment doesn't stop there for the bully as Ryu continues to grab onto his other healthy hand. Seeing this, Taegyu started to panic as fear took over. He started to scream and beg Ryu to stop what he was going to do. But it was all useless as Ryu continued to break his wrist, causing the bully to scream even louder in pain. Taegyu's crew started to run away after seeing and hearing what Ryu was doing to their leader. Wani was still in the warehouse, choosing to close his eyes as he turned away from the sight of what his older brother was doing. The screams of Taegyu were causing him to shiver. After snapping a few more bones, Ryu warns the bully about what would happen to him if they were to touch his younger brother again. Hearing that, Taegyu started to cry, telling Ryu that he understands what he meant by that. Hearing that brought a smile to Ryu's face, but he still grabbed onto Taegyu's shattered hand, telling him that he had to make sure this time. The scene ends with Taegyu screaming out loud in pain, the loudest he had ever screamed in his life. As they left the warehouse behind, Wani was curious about whether Ryu had learned martial arts or something. Hearing that, Ryu figured that Wani hadn't heard about the news yet, so he informed him that the players were able to use their abilities in the real world as well. Ryu demonstrates by summoning a golden light in the palm of his hand which turns into an actual dagger. Wani was impressed to see that a dagger had come out from the golden light. Ryu tells him that the players were able to summon weapons from the otherworld like this. Knowing that, Wani figured out that Ryu's quick movements were a part of the player's powers too, which made him dodge Taegyu's punches. Ryu reveals to him that he had 11 points in his agility stat, just like those stats in video games. 3 agility state was an average adult, whereas 10 points was like an athlete. As they continued their way, Wani was curious about what would happen if Ryu levels up even more, but he tells him that he didn't know as he had never gotten to that level before. But this was a lie as Ryu didn't plan on telling Wani that he was a regressor. In the past, during his 11th regression, Ryu had actually told Wani about everything. After that, another player had kidnapped him. Even though Ryu had taken revenge, he decided that he didn't want his younger brother to endure such a harsh truth because of him. Looking back at his younger brother, Ryu knew that in future fights between players, he needed to be ready to protect his younger brother. But the first thing he needed to do was to get some breakfast at the convenience store, since Ryu knew that Wani was probably hungry. As they entered the store, Wani was curious about where Ryu was heading since the instant noodles were in a different direction. It turns out that Ryu was going for the ATM to have a look at his precious savings. Looking at the screen, he only had $133 to his name. But he still happily withdraws a $100 as Ryu planned to do something with it which surprises Wani. Ryu then decides to head over to a different section in the store, telling Wani that they should pick from this side instead. But Wani was hesitant in choosing the items from this side as they were pretty expensive compared to what they usually get from the store. But Ryu assures him that it was fine for today since it was New Year's Eve. Hearing that, Wani immediately and happily picks the grilled red chili paste pork belly as his meal of choice for New Year's Eve. Ryu could only smile, looking at Wani who was drooling all over the pork belly meal he had chosen. Seeing how happy his younger brother was, Ryu then suggests that they head over to an all-you-can-eat restaurant for some Korean beef. Wani declines Ryu's suggestion, telling him that they couldn't afford Korean beef and that he was more than satisfied with the pork belly meal he had chosen. Ryu continues to smile, thinking in his head that all they needed to do was to wait for a few days. After that, Ryu was sure that he was going to let Wani eat all the meat he ever wanted. Wani was happy to eat the pork belly meal, but as he ate, Ryu stood out and left, coming back to the table with a bunch of lottery tickets, surprising Wani. Looking at the amount of tickets on the table, Wani was shocked to see how many there were. Ryu tells him that he had gotten 20 tickets, which was worth all the $100 they had. Wani was shocked to learn that Ryu had spent all their money on tickets that they might not win. But our boy fills out the tickets continuously, confidently telling Wani that everything he wrote were the winning numbers.
Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.